In Moscow, a generator roars to life. Lights flash. The ground rumbles. Two huge iron doors, the roof of a secret missile silo, slide open. A bassy rumble fills the streets and smoke billows as the missile slowly rises toward the sky. By the time it's just a couple hundred meters off the ground, it's already traveling incredibly fast. In less than a minute, it's nothing but a white dot glinting on the horizon. Believe it or not, it'll take that nuclear missile just 20 minutes to go all the way from Moscow to strike its target, London. So while that missile goes on its way to destroy the world's sixth richest city, let's examine where the UK has gone wrong and why it may be the worst place in the world to be when World War III kicks off. It only took a matter of hours for Vladimir Putin to utter the words World War III after he won the election for his fifth presidential term. Celebrating his highly dubious 88% share of the votes, the Russian president was asked by a reporter about comments made by French President Emmanuel Macron suggesting that France would consider sending its own troops into Ukraine to help defend the country from Russian invasion. Putin did not mince words. I think anything is possible in today's world, and it's clear to everyone that this would be one step from a full-scale World War III. This isn't the first time Putin's camp has openly threatened the West with a global conflict. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev has been one of Putin's closest allies for years. When Putin was forced to step down from the presidency by the Russian constitution, which states that a president can only serve 2 four-year terms in a row, Putin had Medvedev step in as his substitute and changed the constitution itself to allow Putin to come back to serve consecutive 6-year terms. In February 2024, Medvedev made a big claim on Putin's behalf. Speaking to the media, he stated that if Russia were to be defeated in its attempts to invade Ukraine, the entire arsenal of Russian nuclear weapons would be directed at Kyiv, Berlin, Washington, D.C., and London. In his words, Russian defeat would mark the beginning of a total war. Why London? Russia and the UK have a long history of tensions stretching back decades. Russian agents have carried out a spate of high-profile poisonings using Novichok nerve agents and fatally radioactive isotopes on British soil. In the UK, Alexander Litvinenko is a household name, a former KGB officer who defected and joined the British Secret Service as an informant. Litvinenko was assassinated in central London in 2006. The agents involved botched the assassination, and Litvinenko survived in a hospital for over 2 weeks. From his hospital bed, as radiation poisoning gradually destroyed his body, he worked with the British authorities to track down his killers and reveal what valuable intel he had left. In the Salisbury poisonings, 2 people were found unconscious and foaming at the mouth on a bench in the quiet country town of Salisbury. A few months later, in the neighboring town, more deaths. The culprit? A bottle of perfume containing a Novichok nerve agent. After being used on the initial targets, the Russian agent involved dumped the perfume in a trash can in a nearby town, where it went on to poison 2 more people. Add on to this Britain's close alliance with the US during the Cold War years, and it's no surprise that since Russia invaded Ukraine, the UK has sent more aid to Ukraine than any other country except for the United States. It's no wonder Medvedev put the UK so high up on Putin's nuclear target list. But with all this aid going across to Ukraine, is the UK stretching itself too thin? The UK was once quite literally the king of the world. The old adage that the sun never set on the British Empire was true. Colonial rule stretched to all corners of the globe, from Canada to Australia to India and vast swaths of Africa. This tiny island nation was the first in the world to industrialize, and so it had shot ahead of its peers. In 1913, the British Empire was in charge of over 412 million people, a quarter of the world's population. The UK's population made up just 10% of that number. As time has gone on and independence has been granted to each member individually, British influence on the world stage has steadily declined. But the UK is a prominent member of the United Nations Security Council, a founding member of the G7, G20, NATO, AUKUS, OECD, WTO, Council of Europe, OSCE, and the Commonwealth of Nations. The UK is ranked 6th in the world in terms of military power, behind the US, Russia, China, India, and South Korea, with the latter being the only one on the list with a population size even close to the UK's. Looking at the numbers from the top-down level, the UK has immense firepower, vastly outstripping its geographic size and population. It should be more than capable of holding its own in World War III, right? While strong on paper, the UK military has been in a steady decline for the last 2 decades in the real world. The RAF, Royal Navy, and Army are not the same in 2024 as they were at the turn of the 21st century. Right now, the UK is not engaging in any large-scale conflicts, so the military is largely untested. But British analysts have suggested that the situation is dire. The country ranked 6th in the world may not be capable of defending its borders anymore, let alone turning the tide meaningfully in a world war. This is a dramatic fall from being the US's closest ally during the Cold War. How has this happened? Well, it's actually all because of the end of the Cold War. Following World War II, the Soviet Union emerged as the biggest threat to the Western world. While the US and the UK did not engage the USSR in direct active combat, they spent the next half-century fighting proxy wars all around the globe, aiding fighters, training paramilitary groups, and skewing political elections in countries everywhere, as the two sides fought to have their vision for world peace win out. With more and more nuclear weapons pointed at each other's capitals each year, it's a minor miracle that it didn't all end in a nuclear apocalypse. Instead, the Soviet Union collapsed, and a new Russia was supposedly born. This new Russia that emerged in the 1990s was more open to things like international trade and diplomacy. They had democratic elections to choose presidents who could usher the nation forward into a new golden era of politics and trade. The US and Russia set about decommissioning their nuclear warheads in step with one another. The hope for much of the world was that the hostilities of the 20th century were over, and that the 21st century would be the start of an interconnected humanity working together for the future. Militaries across Europe and the world ramped down their defense spending, as finally they lived in a world where a democratically elected Russian president would sit down at the table with EU leaders and discuss trade deals and climate change. A sense of peace and hope settled in Europe. But following 9/11, the US had a new war on its hands: terrorism. As was so often the case, the UK jumped right to their side, going to war in Afghanistan. A couple years later, the US decided to invade Iraq too, following insubstantial claims that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Hot-headed reactionary wars from US President George W. Bush and UK Prime Minister Tony Blair slowly turned into absolute disasters for both nations. For the UK, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan are widely considered to have been failures at best and highly unethical at worst. There was a lack of clear purpose and directives going into these wars. In Afghanistan, the UK went in to fight al-Qaeda in 2001, but by 2006 found themselves fighting the Taliban instead. There were no defined objectives or conditions for when to pull out, leading to mission creep. New objectives would be set or scrapped out of nowhere. Combat in the region was evidently tearing the country apart, but no one could agree on the best solution, and when they could agree, they executed it poorly. An Afghan army was built by NATO, but it was massively bloated at 190,000 members, which was triple the size of the UK's forces at the time. It was poorly trained, badly organized, and totally unsustainable. The UK set the target of improving the lives of Afghans, which again was vague, and their presence was arguably making the situation much worse. Even basic infrastructure projects, like building a school for a few £1,000s, would balloon into ridiculously expensive, poorly run operations. The whole thing was hoovering up money. But worse than that was the human cost. Across the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Syria, and Pakistan, a 2021 estimate put the civilian violent death toll at 432,093. This is over 10 times the losses sustained so far in Ukraine. But war leads to so many more deaths than just direct acts of violence. There are many indirect deaths caused by rises in famine, illness, and crime. The total death toll of these regions is difficult to calculate, and causes of death are difficult to trace, but the final tally could be over 4.5 million since 9/11. Add to this accounts of war crimes being committed in prisons like Abu Ghraib, where the US and UK officers tortured detainees while taking smiling photographs, and it's hard to argue that the UK's involvement in these countries was a positive. The economic cost of these wars was huge. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan combined cost the UK around £30 billion, yet they had very little to show for it. For almost 2 decades, military spending was being funneled into these conflicts, and much of it was wasted and mismanaged. Military spending has not been a popular topic of conversation in UK politics for many years now. Bear in mind, the UK also endured the 2008 financial crash, Brexit, and the COVID-19 pandemic, all of which dented an economy that has essentially been a flat line for the last 5 prime ministers. Much of the UK public feels very cynical about spending more money on warfare after their country's recent history, so few politicians have made it a central point of their campaigns. That means that research and development, upgrading equipment, and general investment into new machinery fell by the wayside. Take the SA-80, for example. This is the standard assault rifle in the British Army, and it has been since 1987. Granted, they have refreshed the design several times over that period. It's immediately recognizable for its magazine, which is loaded into the rear of the gun, behind the handle and trigger. Not many guns look like this, and it's for good reason. The design is bad, really bad. The magazine release catch did not have a guard plate over it, meaning that if you bumped the magazine against your chest or shoulder, it could just fall out. The gun was also designed for right-handed people only, so any left-handed soldiers were at a potentially fatal disadvantage as they had to awkwardly handle the gun not built for them. Add to this the problems with reliability. In the Middle Eastern sand, the guns would jam constantly. They were prone to rust, and even when they performed totally optimally, they were merely just okay in comparison to other rifles. No other country in the world, aside from Jamaica and Bolivia, has purchased SA-80s from the UK, but the Brits have stuck with them for decades now, having sunk so much money into developing, manufacturing, and upgrading them. The story's the same for much of the British military. Designed in the late 1980s, the Challenger 2s, Britain's premier tanks, started to come off the production line in the mid-90s and rolled into Iraq just a few years later in 2003. There have been a number of minor upgrades to the fleet since then, but the Challenger 3 variant remains elusive. Rather than ordering a new set of Challenger 3 tanks, the UK plans to upgrade the 2s into 3s. Now, the UK has 213 tanks in its fleet. Of this number, only 148 of them are due to be upgraded to Challenger 3s, leaving question marks over the fates of the rest. This upgrade will cost a total of £800 million and will extend the shelf life of these tanks to 2040. While this might sound good on paper, many experts have warned that this plan for the tanks falls woefully short. Nobody quite knows how many tanks Russia has at its disposal, but estimates put the number anywhere from 2,000 to 17,000. While these tanks are likely much older and weaker than Challenger 2s, the sheer numbers paint a damning picture. Moreover, the 2027 upgrade date for the tanks may be too late. Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, has alluded to wanting to bring Taiwan under Chinese rule by 2027. Experts have long theorized that China's invasion of their small island neighbor could be the match that ignites World War III. Even if that doesn't transpire, Putin is clearly demonstrating that he has plans that stretch far beyond Ukraine over the coming decade, as he'll want to see the renaissance of the Soviet Union before he dies. Tanks that are starting to be upgraded as the war breaks out are useless to anyone but the enemy. This lack of preparedness extends to the rest of the army as well. British soldiers were given the nickname the borrowers by their allies in the Middle East, as they had to rely on others for ammunition and basic supplies at times. The problem has continued to this day. British politicians have alleged that the UK only has enough ammunition for a few days' worth of fighting. If they wanted to field a force of just 30,000 troops, it could take them 5 to 10 years to equip them with enough helicopters, tanks, and artillery. As of right now, the UK's armed forces are spread out across Europe and the rest of the globe. Combined war games are being held globally by NATO countries and Sweden as a show of military strength against Russia and Chinese forces under the title Operation Steadfast Defender. Exercises in Finland, Poland, East Asia, Germany, and beyond are spreading the UK's military strength across the globe. This is not to mention the UK's fierce support of Ukraine, as they've sent an undisclosed number of Challenger 2s to support the war effort against Putin. This has been admirable, with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky speaking glowingly of British support. But with the lack of investment into new equipment, most of the weapons and vehicles on their way to Ukraine are not being replaced in the stockroom. The UK's strategy for the immediate future is clear: fight Russia through Ukraine now, rather than wait to fight them directly in a few years. However, it also reveals the UK's potential role in a global conflict to support NATO. The key word is support. The size of the British Army has shrunk by almost a third over the last 2 decades, from 155,000, including reserves, down to just 116,000. There are concerns over how rapidly these reserves could be summoned. It would likely take weeks to sufficiently train, equip, and transport the reserve troops, even if everything goes perfectly smoothly logistically, which any member of the British Armed Forces will tell you is far from guaranteed. Should a war suddenly break out on the continent, Britain relies on countries like Germany, Sweden, Finland, Italy, and France to have a strong initial response on the ground while they prepare themselves for war. From that point, the UK would likely arrive as a second wave of reinforcements, bolstering critical positions and taking over from exhausted or wounded troops. Definitely a far cry from the glory days of British world superiority, but it surely can't be the worst place to be if World War III breaks out, can it? The UK is an island cut off from the rest of Europe. Historically, this has been its biggest defensive strength. Rule Britannia, Britannia rules the waves. Britain could always rely on a strong navy and a decent stretch of ocean between itself and Europe to keep it safe. In World War II, as the Nazis marched through Europe, taking the whole of France faster than anyone expected, they came to a halt when they reached the English Channel. The best the Nazis could do was bomb London and other key cities by night. Mounting a full-scale invasion was not easy. This delay arguably gave Britain and the Allies a foothold to get back into the war and turn the tide. But the landscape has changed. The rickety Luftwaffe bombers, with barely enough fuel to cross the Channel and back, are ancient relics by today's standards. Long-range ballistic missiles, supersonic aircraft, unmanned drones, and long-range bombing runs are all challenges the UK's air defenses are untested at defending. Gone are the days of mounting manual machine guns along the white cliffs of Dover and raising barrage balloons over London to force enemy aircraft to fly higher. London's metropolitan area is the largest in Europe. Defending all of that from modern air attacks would be a monumental task, not to mention doing the same with Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool, Cardiff, Edinburgh, and all of the UK's other key cities. With the Army deployed across Europe, the Navy guarding the UK Greenland-Iceland line, and the RAF supporting everyone, how effectively would the UK be able to defend itself from airstrikes and even a ground invasion? But it's not all bad news. There are some real aces up the British military sleeve. While the tanks may be starting to lag behind, Britain is at the cutting edge regarding its fighter jet fleet and is only set to keep growing stronger. The F-35 is widely considered the best fighter jet in the world right now, with lethal stealth capabilities, bleeding-edge technology, and unmatched maneuverability. It's a strong favorite against any other aerial adversary, and it's also formidable as an air-to-ground threat. An F-35 in the right hands has a real competitive edge, even over Russia's top-tier jets, the Su-35s. The UK is currently receiving an order of 47 of them by 2025. It would have been 48, but one crashed. On top of that, the UK's government has committed to ordering another batch soon after. A lot of eyebrows were raised after the UK sold their entire fleet of 72 Harrier jump jets to the US for the absolute bargain bin price of $180 million as part of spending cuts. Still, these new F-35s, the B variants capable of vertical takeoffs at sea, are set to restore the RAF's aerial dominance in a big way. And the Challenger 2s and 3s, despite their age, are nothing to laugh at. Since their creation in the mid-1990s, only 2 have been destroyed in combat, and one of those was actually destroyed by another Challenger 2 by accident. With the Challenger 3 upgrades, they're looking like they'd be punching well above their weight, particularly as any aging equipment woes the UK has pale in comparison to Russia's problems, as they routinely send Cold War-era gear and vehicles into Ukraine, driven by barely trained conscripts. The Royal Navy has also spent decades doing the exact job it would be doing in World War III, defending the UK Greenland-Iceland line. Patrol vessels carrying dozens of F-35s, along with nuclear submarines and patrol aircraft capable of spotting Russian subs from the sky, meant that Russia would have a hard time breaking through that line into the Atlantic. China, on the other hand, would pose a more serious problem, but as they're on the other side of the world, with the US acting as a barrier between them, the UK wouldn't have to worry about their naval presence too much unless things went very badly in the war. And yet, even with all these things in place, there is one missile-sized problem that the UK is powerless to defend itself against. A certain nuclear warhead has already made its way across all of Europe and is hurtling toward the capital as we speak. Should World War III go nuclear, which is a real possibility given how World War II ended, how volatile Kim Jong-un is, and how fixated Putin is on hoarding power, London would be the second highest target in the West after Washington, D.C. No matter how well you've built up your military, there's not much you can do when a nuke is flying at your government. This is where the fundamental flaw in the UK reveals itself, the real reason why the UK is the worst place to be if World War III breaks out. The little corrugated iron air raid shelters families made at the foot of their gardens in World War II will be like tissue paper. Once the nuke hits, there's nowhere to go. In Europe, in the US, and in much of the rest of the world, civilians can flee the nuclear fallout. Anyone caught up in the strike will die either immediately or within days, but there is hope for those on the periphery. Civilians can load into cars and buses and drive as fast and far away as possible. In the UK, you can only go so far before you reach the ocean. There, you'll have to fight your way onto overcrowded ships that don't have anywhere near the capacity to evacuate even a meaningful fraction of the population. Even those who get off the island in boats or planes will likely be caught up in the fighting raging in the seas around the UK. They either have to go toward Europe and the Russian front line, or take the long and dangerous voyage to the US, where they could be picked off at any point. But for those who are left behind as the last of the boats and planes depart, there's nothing to do but stand there on the shore as the radioactive rain starts to pelt down, waiting for more bombs to tear through the rest of the country. Now check out how England managed to invade 90% of the world, or watch this video instead.